Welcome to Unscripted Pivots. I am your host, Danielle Sproles. Today, we're graced by the presence of an individual who is not only a standout business leader, but also an exemplary human being. I'm talking about the phenomenal Dom Farnan, the CEO of DotConnect, a global recruiting firm with a unique and powerful mission to create conscious workplaces. Under Dom's guidance, DotConnect has skyrocketed in growth, earning recognition from Inc. magazine as one of the fastest growing companies in America. This isn't just a story of commercial success, though. What makes this journey truly awe-inspiring is the conscious leadership Dom embodies, a leadership style that has seen her move from being what she candidly describes as a quote-unquote toxic boss to a quote conscious connector. Dom has not only revolutionized her company, but also undergone a profound personal transformation. She chronicles her journey in her newly released book. It's called Now Here, A Journey from Toxic Boss to Conscious Connector. It's an insightful guide for anyone seeking to navigate their own path of personal and professional evolution. So without further ado, let's welcome our esteemed guest, Dom Farnan, to share more about her journey, her philosophy, and her vision for a more conscious world. Welcome to Unscripted Pivots, Dom. I am so thrilled to have you here. How are you today?
Yeah, thank you, Danielle. I'm so happy to be here. I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm just tickled is how I am. I love the ripple effect that this podcast has brought to me. We did not know each other, but for a common denominator, another guest, Sonez, that was on the show about a month ago. And everybody's just willing to introduce me to other people who are making a really big difference in this world and who are willing to share their journey in a vulnerable and transparent way. So I'm so excited to have you on today. You have a fascinating journey. You're going from a self-described toxic boss to a conscious connector. Can you talk a little bit about what triggers this transformation and how it affected the way that you run DotConnect?
Yeah, so I talk a bit about this in my book, but essentially, I started my career pretty early in my life. So I was 17, I graduated high school early, and then I wanted to work a real job and leave the pizza place I was working and like get a job in corporate. That was my dream. So,
Okay.
so I did that. So I wanted to work at an office and I got an office job. And, that was an early indoctrination into the way of working, right? Like I had a lot of constraints. I had to dress a certain way. I had to sound a certain way. I had to act a certain way. I had to be somewhere and be this persona from a very young age. But that was exciting for me, and I love that. But I spent 20 years in corporate within these constraints, and it was in 2020 when I was locked down at my house and I wasn't able to travel so much with client work and recruiting, and I was usually all over the world, where I really had to sit and face off with myself. And I started to recognize and realize that, maybe some of my behavior wasn't very healthy. Maybe some of the things that I had brought into my company and mindsets that I had, prescribed to weren't aligned anymore for where I was at. And there was really a moment in May of 2020 where I couldn't get out of bed. I was just like, what the hell, man? Like, I have everything that I've ever wanted in life. If you looked at me on paper or literally looked at my house or my success or all these external things, it looked like it was amazing, but I felt like shit. I just didn't feel
You
fulfilled.
know what? I want to take a second here. Two things, everything that you're sharing already demonstrates the power of the pause. And COVID really inflicted upon us a lot of pausing because the world almost stopped, existing to some degree, and we were all inside. But what's really cool, right out of the gate, you're sharing with us a very important message, how we can be, there's a lack of harmony when our outsides don't match our insides,
Yep.
right? That
Yeah.
disconnect that was there. And so you were willing in that time that you had to yourself to take a look. I'm not surprised you were exhausted by any of that, right? Because whenever we have a sense of awareness, whoa.
Yeah,
right?
I think that was it. Like I had no awareness before that. That was it. I was just existing, existing, existing. And then when I had a minute that I wasn't filling with a trip or a meeting or this or that or some kind of other fake thing that was important at the time, then I sat with myself and realized, like, yeah, this doesn't feel very good. And it was an intense internal voice that was like, we've had it. We're not doing this anymore. This isn't working for you and for, maybe it was my soul essence. I don't know what it was, but it was something that was very strong that was like, yeah, we're not doing this anymore. So enough is enough. We've got to figure it out. And if you don't figure it out now, it could be really bad. So like take action.
Well, yeah. I mean, pain is usually a catalyst to change. We're either going to numb it or we're going to address it. Is literally, it boils down to those two choices. And you decided to do the hard work. So let everybody know, like, what did that first begin to look like for you? And was it more around your job, or was it more around your personal development?
Initially, it was just around my job. So, I invested in working with a coach, and I was very direct with her. Like, I want to tackle my company. We've got to fix all this stuff. My marriage and my personal life, total mess, but let's not even talk about that. Let's just talk about my work. And that's how I approached it initially. And my coach was like, interesting. Okay. Like, let's go there for a minute. Let's let you think that this is how it's going to be. And like, let's only talk about work. Okay. Like, wink, wink. And as I dug into that, then I started to see and have the awareness that, it's all interconnected between the personal life and the professional life. And it's no wonder that my work wasn't going well because I wasn't fulfilled in my relationship. And I felt a lot of struggles in motherhood. And I felt a lot of challenges just being in New Jersey where we were living and feeling very isolated at the time. And so there's a lot of that stuff that was bleeding into what created a workaholism type of environment for myself and my team. Also a lot of like codependence and, blended like relationships within my team of like friendships turn business relationships turn like toxic. Like there was a lot of stuff that came out of that.
So it sounds like there was a lack of boundaries that were happening too. We don't operate in a vacuum. And now you know this, right? And now I know that. And we know that after doing a whole lot of work, on ourselves. And how liberating is that to understand the interconnectedness of it and that you can't get away with just focusing on one thing, right?
Yeah.
It's so easy to focus on work and think, that's where we're going to make everything better. Or sometimes it's the opposite. But being, listen, you're a boss. Right through and through. So I could see where you would be like, that's what I'll tackle and that's what I'll fix first, right? Because there's a sense of power in that role. Not so much when we come into personal development, right? We have to, there's a moment of humility that has to happen, right? So what did that look like for you? What were the first things that you were doing? And how was that journey that even led up to the book? Wow. You're an author, Dom. You're an author.
Yeah.
You not only lived it, you wrote about it so that you can empower other people, on their journey. So this is really fantastic.
Yeah. For me, I'll say that like facing off with myself was and continues to be the scariest thing that I do because I just don't know what else is in there, what else is going to come up. And even with a plan or an intention, when you're doing this type of inner work and healing and whatever you want to call it, personal development, like, it's kind of like whack-a-mole. Like you can see something obviously and you kind of will go work on that. And then you whack it down and then something else pops up and you're like, holy shit, like I wasn't expecting that. Okay. And so that's what my life's been for the last 3 years is this like beautiful game of kind of a little bit of whack-a-mole and just seeing like what I'm all about. So it's been very fulfilling, but also very scary and really challenging. I'm in a period right now of like a rebirth and reimagining like what my company looks like, what my role is in the company, as well as what I want to be doing moving forward. And that's been a scary thing, because for a long time I was on this trajectory to continue to run and grow this business. And now I'm feeling called into other areas, like more writing and more speaking and more thought leadership, and less running of a big team and company, and more just being, out here doing things like this and talking
it
about
sounds
this.
to me like you're not really having a replacement of the things you're doing, but you're having an expansion. And it is really unsettling when we recognize, after doing some work, that there is no destination. What there is a journey, and that journey continues. Right.
Yeah.
It doesn't necessarily have to be daunting, but we're like, what? And your analogy to whack-a-mole, I get it. We attend to one thing and another pops up, but what they really are, they're not obstacles, they're opportunities, depending upon how we shift our mindset to tackle them. Tell us a little bit about DotConnect and what it is that, you're doing out there in that space.
Yeah, so DotConnect is a global talent advisory. So we often go into companies and we are fully embedded within organizations, acting as an extension of their recruiting team, if they have one. If they don't have one, then we are it. So we work with their leaders, we understand their values, we help them to come up with their organizational charts, their job descriptions, and then we go and find talent for them. But what has always been the underpinning of all of that, before I even had a team, and what people often ask me is like, what makes you different than every other recruiting firm? Okay, so what makes us different is that you have me and you have the team that I work with. That's the only difference. Like, we can follow any recruiting process. They're all pretty similar, but how much we care and the high level of intentionality through our process is our difference. And the fact that we are in it for the long run. So I'm not concerned or worried about taking tiny little short-term projects. We want to really get engaged with companies that have a mission and want to create impact in the world, and work with them through their growth, ebbs and flows. So there's been times when we work with companies and it'll be 6 months turned into 5 years, turned into a pause, and then they're back when they go to another company. And so we're all just really about building relationships over long periods of time. And that's what's been our flywheel, and been, how we've really gotten business and grown in the last few years.
Yeah, so they're not just jobs, they're relationships. And that's what differentiates you. And you also said something very important, that you were able to, in your company, DotConnect, identify what the organization is about. It's almost like a branding and a message and a need, right? So if you're going in and you're telling them that's a pretty big deal. You're not just finding the people, you're helping them understand what it is that the gaps are, right, within their organization. And so that's a pretty unique talent as well. I don't think all recruiting firms are doing that. That's a whole lot more than checking boxes and doing interviews, for sure.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah, and I think we're even taking it a step further now, where I personally am getting a lot more involved in bringing conscious cultures to companies, and working with leaders and emerging leaders on how to be conscious within your company, and what does it mean to have that more impactful relationship and dynamic within your culture. And we've been working on that for the last 18 months within our company.
So your book, Now Here, A Journey from Toxic Boss to Conscious Connector, is a deeply personal account of your own transformation. What made you decide to share this journey publicly? And what was the process of writing and publishing for you? What was that like?
Yeah, so in July of 2020, I went through Seth Godin's Alt MBA program. It's 31 days program. It's a very high touch, kind of intense writing and business leadership experience. And so through that, I did a lot of writing. And by the end of that, I met with one of the coaches, and he said, I think you're a really good writer. I want to see you write more. And I was like, oh, I've always loved writing. Thank you for the feedback. It was not something really on my radar. And he said, I think you should write a book. And I'm like, maybe, one day, whatever. So I kind of started writing my manuscript then, and I was a little confused as to what I wanted the story to be. So it was almost initially a memoir. It was like, when I was 6 years old, this happened, and then this, and it was like very, very way back in the day. So I wrote about 100 pages. I put it on pause, and then I put it in the back of my mind. And then really my journey started to take shape after that. You know, I got deeper in with coaching and masterminds and plant medicine and transformational work, and that is what I wanted to talk about. So then the story emerged at the beginning of last year, in early 2022. I went into a mastermind, and part of that program was to ship a creative project by the end of it. So I had to, like, to be enrolled in the program, I had to pick a thing and say, by the end of this 9-month experience together, the thing will be out in the world. And so I picked a book, and I decided to commit to writing the book. And so I co-published it. And
what does that mean, you co-published it? I'm not an author. I don't know anything about this. So tell everybody.
So I paid some level of investment to work with a publishing company for them to like do all the logistics, like get it wherever it needs to be and print it on demand and all that kind of stuff, as well as working with a ghostwriter who helped me really bring the story to life. So I had my manuscript, and then I had my idea that I wanted to bring to the table. And through my experience, then I worked with a writer who essentially interviewed me every week for 9 months for like 2 hours, and took those interviews.
Sounds like a very long therapy session.
Yeah. And he like,
I mean, there's a lot you're exposing, right? I mean, what did that feel like when you're literally purging your deepest, darkest struggles, feelings, milestones, celebrations? What was that like to do that in the presence of somebody that you obviously trusted would articulate it and express it in a way that captured your experience?
Yeah, it was very emotional, and it continues to be emotional because I just recorded the Audible, and that'll be out soon. And going through that,
I'm all about that. We talked about that. I want to hear your voice. I love to listen to books. Good for you. You just did that. Was that hard? Was that hard to record? Or?
It was so hard. 6.5 hours over 2 days, but it was so emotional. Like it was harder than rereading the book and editing and all the things, like reading it out loud. There was times when I really had to take a break and like sit with, wow, I really had to relive some of these moments that I share. But I'm so glad I did, because to your point, like I really appreciate when an author is the one reading their own book.
You're speaking your truth. I mean, there's that, this isn't fictional by any stretch. So kudos to you for stepping up and doing that. And then confirming why you did it, right? When you hear it again like that from, it's like a different angle of experience. It's one thing to write it. It's one thing to read it. And now you're speaking it out loud. It's like you're owning it on another level.
It feels very much like, one of my affirmations is like, I'm still here. So I often reflect back on all of the things that have happened. And in that stillness in my reflection, I always hear this like, your little spirit voice saying, yeah, but you're still here. Like you've gone through all these things, but you're here right now. Like look at your life around you, and, don't get into all the doom and gloom or shoulda, coulda, wouldas, because you're still just right here, right now, and you're okay.
Yes, you are okay. In your own words, you encourage others, quote, to create space for you to listen to your inner guide and your inner intuition. Can you share a time when your intuition guided you in a significant way, especially when it contradicted public opinion?
Yeah, I would say I'm living it right now. So, 6 months earlier, I was working with a couple of different coaches, leadership and business coaches, and they were really influencing me to continue to hold the line and invest and pour everything into my company, despite it being really challenging economically. Like there's not a lot of hiring happening right now. Let's be real.
No, there's not.
My company is like really been very slow. And I was putting a lot of effort and energy into sales, marketing, events, traveling, like being out there in the world. But I also wasn't really receiving anything back from all those efforts. And that was hard to continue to have the momentum to do that. And so what I did in the last few months was take a step back. I realized I was kind of towing the line of a burnout again this April. And so one of my coaches that is definitely more on like my spiritual leadership side, said, I really feel that this is a blessing for you, this pause in growth within your company. And, maybe you need to sit with that and really take time off. Like, given everything that you just went through and you birthed this book and all this stuff's happening, like, when will you have time moving forward at the pace in which you're moving to take a step back? So, how do you want to feel in the summer? How do you want to feel for the next few months? Drop into that and see where it leads you. And so that's where I really did listen to myself. And my intention for this particular exact summer was I wanted to not travel. I wanted to be here in Laguna where I live. I wanted to walk my son to junior lifeguards every day. I wanted to have no meetings unless it was stuff that was interesting and fun and felt energetically aligned. And I wanted to stop sales, marketing, and everything else within my company. And whatever happened,
just put it on the back burner for now, right? Because there's really not a lot of activity, and you're not going to create it by making more noise right now. But what's so cool about that, it's like mimicking what you experienced in COVID. Really, what we all experienced in COVID is that the universe is literally delivering you a gift, right? A gift of time and a gift of space. And how are you going to receive it? And I know for myself, whenever I'm uncomfortable about something going on, that'll create a pause where I'm going like, this podcast, it's like WTF moments, right? Like they're pivoting moments when we're like, what the fuck, and okay, what are we going to do with that? And then the question is really a different question. So the question shifts from, why is this happening to me? Because it's usually something we don't like, right? And the question becomes, why is this happening for me?
Yep.
And when we search for the answer to the second question, we'll usually find, and sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly, we'll find out why the experience is at our door and the gift within that experience. And it doesn't mean that it's easy. It just means it's usually worth it. And you're really seizing the opportunities left and right. So you have a sense of intuitive pull to stay centered. Right. I can see that. And with all that you're sharing about the coaching and the people that you're aligning yourself with, you're making sure that the energy that surrounds you in your life is really good. Now, if you don't travel for the summer, I mean, come on, sister, you live in Laguna Beach, California.
I know it wasn't that
people
hard.
are coming here. Okay?
It wasn't that hard, but it is like, it's hectic in town right now.
It's
like,
awesome. I mean, Southern California, and earlier on you mentioned New Jersey, and I'm from New Jersey. You don't really have the accent that I have, but I've probably been there a whole lot longer than you. Where in New Jersey were you for a bit?
We were in Princeton for 5 years.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Princeton, another gorgeous spot of that state. Yeah, and you've been out here for how many years now on the West Coast?
We've been back since 2021, September of 2021.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. Tell us a little bit about, I know that you do some things that some people might, categorize as woo-woo, right? I think that you talk to me about, I mean, I don't, which is why I want to talk about them. And because I like to see a lot of things when it comes to healing to be, it may not look mainstream, but how valuable you have found it. And you have a voice, right? You have standing in the community. You are accomplished. You're a doer and you're a giver. So now that you've come in touch with a few things that may not have seemed to be, answers before, they are now, right? So I think you practice meditation. Do you do sound baths? Talk about the type of things that are alternatives that have really enriched you and helped you get back into yourself, your true self.
Yeah, I will say meditation for sure. I hosted an event last week here in Laguna locally. It was a lot of heads of talent, heads of people, executives, people running companies. And we kicked off the afternoon with a breathwork and sound bath. And so the invitation for many of the people, because they had never experienced breathwork, was to do it, to try it, to see if they were open to it. And so that really helped me. It was the first somatic type of experience that I did within my healing journey. So, the very first thing I did was find a coach and make an investment in myself through the coaching. And then the later stages of that, maybe 6 months later, came experimenting with other things. And that was breath work. And for me, it was super, super healing. At the time, my energy was still almost like it was like a dark cloud. Like, it felt like I was carrying some really dense, heavy energy. And with breath work, it allowed me to move that energy and have a big cry and have a big scream and just really release these things that were stored in my body that I didn't even know about or hadn't thought about in however many years. So that's one thing that I love and is still definitely very present for me, and a modality that I love to share with people. Meditation. My husband prescribes to transcendental meditation, and he's very religious about his 20-minute experience in the morning and afternoon.
Twice a day. I know. Yeah. I have not religiously been practicing it, but my husband and I, about I guess 5 years ago, we worked with a woman in Laguna, and she just reached out to me recently to say, hey, where have you been? But after COVID, they didn't have the regular group meetings that kind of kept us a connective community. They do have one on, I think it's on Treetop in Laguna. I have to get in touch with her.
Yeah, it's probably Louise. Yeah.
Yes, that's who it is.
Yeah, Louise and Larry. Yeah, we love them.
Yeah. Yes. Okay. So, that's so cool. I remember looking, again, when we invite these things into our life, it's usually because we don't feel like centered, right? We're like in some sort of discomfort. We're like, okay, something has to come in a healing way. And meditation in some way, shape, or form is usually introduced into a conversation when you start asking for like wellness. And I thought 20 minutes twice a day, like who's got time for that? I'm so darn busy, that kind of thing. And what I will say about TM is when you practice it religiously, you actually, you don't lose 40 minutes collectively. What you gain is probably an extra 4 hours. That is like greasing the wheels of your inner self.
Yeah, totally.
The way that I would move through my day when I was doing that as a regular practice was just like magical. So, whether you choose that or something else, but TM I think is terrific. And when you mentioned breath work, what's really interesting, so I'm in corporate America, and as are you, right, to some degree. There is the introduction of breath work at most of the conferences that I go to. So if there's going to be anybody, some leader talking about thought leadership or leadership just in general, if they're a speaker for like a part of the day, let's say 3 hours, I always see breath work incorporated into it, and they're not delivering it in a sense that they're a savant and they actually can do it in some expert way, but they're communicating two things. One, the importance of it, okay, for like, emotional and mental cleansing, and just to slow down so you can actually stay focused and structured to the degree you need to. But also they'll introduce many exercises that the average person can, share with somebody else, right? So they're not experts, but I continue to see that in all of the different conferences I go to. So there's a lot of awareness and support for that, and the value is tremendous. So I love that you're talking about how it's added to your life and your journey, because it's a big deal. It's a big deal.
I think it's so beautiful. And honestly, even with my very woo stuff like plant medicine, your breath is your anchor. That's your life force energy. And once you understand some of how to leverage it, like it keeps you safe, So we recently got back from an experience in Costa Rica where I sat with ayahuasca again, and through this time around, like, last year I went to Peru and had my first experience, and I was so nervous, and I didn't really have the full like tools, I really like sat with the medicine, but she really took me for a ride. Whereas this time in Costa Rica, I was very anchored in my breath, and I knew my body, and I knew how I would navigate this next experience, and I had full trust. I think, last year in April of 22, I didn't know. And I felt like unsure of myself or my body and how I would navigate. This year I went in June and was like, nope, I know exactly how I want this to go. I had set intentions, but then I also trusted everything that I had learned and been practicing for the last 2 years, 3 years, and just anchored into that, and it was so beautiful.
Well, we're not born a graduate, right? I mean, there are experiences that you can't bypass to deepen your understanding and your experience. So that's really cool that you're doing that, and that's not something that's necessarily mainstream, but I know that it has served you. And it's extremely holistic, and it's in line with everything else that you're doing. right? And there's the trust factor, not only in the people that you're doing this with, but in yourself and what you
Yep.
want to get out of that, right? And I think anytime we are able to park fear, okay, we got to get away from fear, because fear is the
Yep.
thing that can be so debilitating, and there's a sense of paralysis. And I love all the acronyms for fear. My mom used to say, fear stood for future events already ruined. She was always saying that to me, because, I'd be like, well, I can't, I'd be future tripping all over the place, and it
Yep.
was just fear. And fear is real. It's not that it's not, but there are so many tools out there to overcome fear. And the more that we actually confront what it is that's holding us back or what scares us, we realize, A, it's not as big as we think that it once was. It lives larger in our head, in our bodies, than it does in reality. And B, we prove that we can get through it. And there's no way around that but experience. You have
Yep.
to have those mile markers, and you're doing all that. And that's like really, really terrific. And so let me ask you about the book. I'm running into more women that are authors through this podcasting, and it's so terrific, because at some point maybe I'd like to write a book. I mean, I never thought I'd be podcasting, and here I am. We're capable of so many ways to express ourselves. And what did that look like for you at first? You had the support and the encouragement of somebody who identified your talent before you even knew you really had it. They said, hey, you're a really good writer, and you obviously have a story. Right. So you had the boxes. Did you feel in the beginning at all like the sense of imposter syndrome? Like, well,
Yeah.
I own a recruiting global firm. Like, yeah, that's important. And
Yeah.
yeah, I'm educated. And yeah, but am I an author? Like,
Yeah.
tell some of the female listeners out there how they can overcome any obstacles if they want to write a book themselves.
Yeah. I felt like for a while, and to some degree, some days I have my moments, of feeling like, well, who's going to even listen? Like, who's interested in my story? So I have had a lot of that inner dialogue. But I feel like some of that's just conditioned tendencies and conditioned programming, but it's not your true essence, because often when you have a reflection back from what I call, a clean mirror, which is, somebody who else is in the world reflecting back to you, their experience of you, then you really see who you are. And so that's also the beautiful thing sometimes with plant medicine experiences. So it's interesting because a friend of mine was telling me, he was reflecting back to me his experience of me, and he's like, well, yeah, of course, like, people want to read your story. This is so great, blah, 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 blah. And I'm just like, wow, you sound so excited about that. But like in my heart, I'm like, I don't know, like, blah, blah, blah. Like, all the little things to, not get me to take action. So for a long time, like, I started writing this in July of 2020. It didn't come out till this March, really. I finished writing it.
It's always a process,
Right. And
much longer than you anticipate is what I'm told by other authors, right? They're
Yeah.
like, if you think it's going to be a year, you can add another year to that, that timeline. But it's incredible that you did it and you had the fortitude to go ahead, right? I mean, this is what my podcast is about: women empowerment and owning up to the pivots that they come to these forks. Should I make a left or should I make a right? Somebody told you you're capable of doing this, Dom, and then you
Yeah.
did it. You didn't stall. You did it.
I think that
And
there's something to that. There's something to have a little bit of wind in your sails, as a jumping off point. And then I think through even that, my experience of writing it, and through my journey for the last couple of years, the deeper I got and the windier the road got, the more I was like, yeah, I want to share this. Like, I want to just like bring this to light for people. And I want anybody to feel like they can start anywhere, and take action. The whole goal of the book is so that people walk away feeling like maybe they might have some of those similar behaviors that I uncovered about myself, and maybe they want to take action. And here's like 500 things that you can do tomorrow for $0 or for an investment or whatever. And you can just do the one thing. And if you do the one thing and you have discipline and devotion within your own life for your own sake, for like the sake of you, taking a stand for yourself, then you can do it. Like, you will see changes, you will see ripple effects. So it was funny because when my mom initially read it, she was like, well, I mean, it's great if you can invest in a coach and blah, 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 and all this feedback. And I'm like, yeah, but I also mentioned like 500 other things that you can do in your daily life that have nothing to do with coaching. That's just practices that you can try and whatever. Then she read the book again and she goes, oh, okay, I see it now. And I actually think it's really good because you're very vulnerable. And I've never heard any authors talk about like all their own shit the way that you talk about it and like really own it. A lot of times people will just be like, you know, and then this happened and then this was a success or a failure, whatever. She's like, you really like reflect a lot about yourself and you kind of own it. I'm like, all right, thank you. That's the point. That's what I want. I want people to see.
And that's what's going to make it wildly successful, okay? Because it's going to be relatable. And there'll be in the show notes, there'll be a link as to how people can purchase your book. And I really look forward to hearing the Audible version of it for sure. Let me ask you this with regard to DotConnect. So when you had that, you know, that moment where you realized what a toxic boss you were and that you no longer wanted to be that person, and you started to change, what kind of reception did you have from the people, the colleagues or the employees that you worked with? Like, what was their reaction to the new version of Dom?
Yeah, I had a lot of eye rolls and resistance and, you know, pushback and gossip, and it wasn't for everybody. Some people on the team that were originally on the team left because they were not buying into their own personal development and inner work and invitations that I had created for them.
Okay.
Other people always kind of knew it. They were like, I knew she was great under there somewhere. Like, I always like felt her heart and knew she wasn't really this crazy. Like,
they stuck it out.
Yeah, they stuck it out. You know, for me, I was very transparent with my COO and one of my best friends, Erica, and I kind of laid it all out for her. Like, here's my commitment. Here's what I'm doing, what I'm willing to do. And it became less about saying and more about being, less doing and talking. And it was more like, how are you energetically showing up? How are you being? In particular, how are you being when shit is hard and stressful? Not when everything's great and you're all making money and living your best life. It's easy to be in your high vibe energy then.
Sure.
But what do you do when it's adverse and challenging and traumatizing and whatever? Like when you have setbacks, and that's when you see your true colors and your own level of leadership and with the company and culture that you're creating. So, you know, we've embarked on a really challenging time in our business and we've made a lot of changes and it's really stripped things back. But through all of that, I've seen my team and the right values aligned team members come together, and it's just so beautiful how everybody's showing up for each other at this point in time.
So now you have quality over quantity when it comes to the team, right?
Oh, 100%.
It probably got a little bit shorter for sure.
Yeah.
What advice would you give to business leaders who might currently identify as toxic bosses, you know, and they want to begin their own journey towards becoming more conscious leaders, as described in your book? You know, what type of advice would you give them?
I would say start with yourself. Focus on yourself and give yourself grace. You know, this is messy. Once you take ownership for your shit, it's messy and it's not pleasant. And it's like, damn, like you don't really always know that you were like this. Like, I never knew that I was toxic. I wouldn't know that like workaholism was a toxic behavior. I didn't know that slacking my team member at midnight about some client thing was like toxic. But as I started creating awareness and boundaries for myself, as well as I started loving myself more, things just started shifting for me. So start with you. Look in the mirror, start with you, take responsibility for your spiritual, mental, emotional, and physical well-being first.
The whole package.
Yeah, and then see how that goes. But don't expect everybody to fall in line immediately. Do expect that not everybody wants to do that, and be okay with everybody on their own journey and timeline. And you do you just worry about your own stuff, because the ripple effect will compound, and like the people who are for you within your company or your customer base or whatever, they will start to magnetize towards you once you really dial in your energy. It's not about everybody else. It's about you. And you may also find yourself in a situation where what you were doing and what was your business is not a fit anymore. You might grow out of it. You might be like,
there's the revelation.
Yeah, I'm not doing this. And that's totally okay. So I think just like be open, give yourself grace, and just worry about your own stuff. It was the same thing when I started my journey. And initially I wanted my husband to be right along with me. And we were like way on two different pages. And it was only till recently that our journeys have become closer and more parallel. But for a long time, they were like, I was light years ahead and he was on a different plan. And now we're like, okay, we're parallel. We're still on two different timelines a little bit, but it feels closer than it ever has felt. And I'm not trying to convince anymore. I'm just being in my own vibe about it.
And what I'm hearing is that, when you're saying your advice to give somebody is to start with themselves, that's themselves. Not so we have to just work on one person ourselves, right, at the outset. But we do it in community, not in isolation. But we don't necessarily do it as a community. Okay. So it's like you lean into the community, and what that may look like is like coaches, if you can afford to pay for them, or, anybody else in that space that can kind of lead you to wellness in whatever it is you're working on. But it's still, the focus has to reside in you and not those around you. So you don't do it alone, but you do it for yourself alone. Right.
Yep.
I mean, that's the message that I'm hearing. And, my experience has always been that whenever I get on some new kick, whether it's like, oh, now I'm going to play paddle tennis. I mean, something as benign as that. And then I'm like, the first person I want to call is my husband. Don't you want to learn how to, we don't call it paddle tennis in California. Yeah. We call it pickleball. I keep calling it paddle because that's what we do in Jersey. Pickleball, like just things like that. I'm like the professional recruiter, okay, in my own world. Yeah. Like, and if I find wellness in a certain thing, or I'm going to drop a bad habit, you should do it too. No, you know what? If there's something that we are called to do because we know it in our inner self, right, and we're listening to that voice, that's a very individual journey, but it's done with the community that can support that. You're so fascinating. I knew that you had that event last week. I was in New York for work and I wasn't able to go. Sonos mentioned it to me. Whenever there's something going on, I want to be included. I want to be part of this inner circle and add value to the things that you're doing out there, because I just really respect your work and who you are. And I can't wait to listen to your book, because as I shared with you early, that's what I wanted to hear. Right. So all of this will be in the show notes, but tell people, do we follow you on Instagram? I know you have your own website, and, we'll include everything. Yeah. But speak to that before we have our goodbye outro.
Amazing. Yeah. People can find me at domfarnan.com. You can find my company at DotConnectLLC.com. Instagram, I am Dom Farnan. I'm also on Threads now, which I really like because it's like little short form writing instead of Twitter. I never got on Twitter. Also, I am Dom Farnan. So hope to see you all any of those places.
All right. You are Dom Farnan. Such a pleasure to have you on. And I wish you continued success in all that you do.
Thank you so much.